Shalom Chevre, this is Richard Solomon. In view of the fact that you will be completing your Menti handbook as the final project for our class on MJE, Mentoring Jewish Educators, Knowledge Base and Skills, I thought I would give you this PDF file which you might want to include in the mentoring handbook. You will also have a copy of this as a Word file. So let me go over the various sample observation instruments that you'll find here. I have also added a few additional ones that you might want to include. The first sample observation instrument measures student on task behavior. Student on task behavior. Whether students are doing what they're supposed to, whether they're out of their seat, whether they're talking, whether they're playing or fooling around, or whether they're out of the room. Now you can set up your own key, if you like, for other kinds of student behaviors. And what occurs is you write the student's name on the top of each line, and at each particular time, let's say you do a time sweep at 9 o'clock in the morning, and at 9:04, 9:08, etc. These represent the different times that you observe the student, and you simply record his or her name here and the code next to the number. So if you had Richard's name here, and it was at 9 o'clock, and Richard was out of his seat, you would record a B. If Richard at 9:04 was talking to a student, let's say, you could also have one properly answering a question, but let's say we'll say talking to a friend, you would put C over here. And this is how you use this sample on task student observation form. Again, you can modify this in any way you like. Let's go to the next form. This is the sample teacher to student and student to student verbal flow form. This actually measures the verbal communications of a teacher and a student. F represents female, M represents male, which you can put in these boxes where students are. You can put the names of the students in the boxes. If you like, that represents their seats. And this arrow shows a teacher talking. And these hash marks indicates the time the teacher is talking. If the student speaks back to the teacher, the arrow goes down. These hash marks represent students speaking to the teacher many different times, a particular student, and this represents students speaking to each other. So here's a picture of a possible classroom, and here's the teacher's desk, and this represents the teacher's dialogue. Now when the arrow shows this way, points the whole class and not to a particular student, then that means the teacher is talking to the entire class. Example of how that instrument would look. Here we have two students speaking to each other. Here is a teacher speaking 1, 2, 3, 4 times to this particular student. Here's a situation where the student is speaking to the entire class 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. In other words, the first time you have an arrow, it means one communication, and every hash mark represents another. So in this case, the student spoke once, twice, 3 times, and 4 times to the entire class. If the student spoke directly to the teacher, as the student did here, the student in this seat spoke once, twice, 3 times to the teacher. Let's continue. You can create any configuration for classroom seating that you like, and you can also create your own special key. So TQ would represent teacher question, teacher idea, teacher praise, teacher criticism or reprimand, student question, student correct response, student incorrect response. Again, these are observation instruments designed to assess the flow of communication between the teacher and the student and students. And you can create your own key if you like. So here's a classroom, here are the students, and here's the teacher. Now this is an interesting form. This form measures teacher movement in the classroom. So once again, you have a configuration of your classroom seating, could be this way or any way you like, and this suggests that this teacher does a lot of teaching and talking and moving in the front of the room. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. This would suggest that here's a teacher who likes to move to the right side. You see that? So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And one time the teacher moved up here. So what we have a situation is a way of mapping teacher movement in the classroom. This is helpful because sometimes teachers only sit at the desk or stand in front of the desk, and it's very important for, in terms of behavioral control, to have the teacher move around and let students know that he or she is listening to them. Now here is a new observation form that I created for you. It relates to the 8 essential elements of a lesson plan. It's an observation form based on the work of Madeline Hunter. And what we have here is you record the name of the teacher. You'll be observing the date of the lesson, the class, and the content of the lesson, and whether you observe something with the O, it was not observed, NO, or you're not certain if it was observed. And what you have are the elements of a lesson: the objective, anticipatory set, introductory activity, developmental activities, guided practice, assessment, independent activities, and closure. And notice what you do. You simply record O, NO, or a question mark if you had seen or observed or did not observe the teacher identifying the lesson outcome, the anticipatory set, and you can write in comments over here with regard to what your indicator is. Here is another new observation form you could use. This is related to backward design or understanding by design. Very similar to the previous one, we have the name of the teacher, the date of the lesson, the subject, the title of the lesson, and you indicate in this column whether it was observed, not observed, or you're not certain if it was observed. And the elements for observation relate to enduring Jewish knowledge or understanding, essential questions, assessment, lesson objective, anticipatory set, introductory activity, developmental activities, guided practice, independent activities, and closure. Here's an interesting observation template that you can use. What you do is you could indicate with your mentee what you're going to be looking for. Like you might want to see if he or she has an agenda on the board, has an objective on the board, has a warm-up or anticipatory set, has introductory activities, guided practice, etc. Or you can create one where you and your mentee, which is your pre-service or in-service teacher, together create an observation form, and these will be the things that you'll be looking at. So that's another form that you could utilize, or one that you could create yourself. Now, here's a very simple observation form. These would be the things that you saw that you like, and you of course would explain what the student had done, meaning the student teacher or the in-service teacher had done, what you didn't understand about the lesson, not necessarily what was negative, but you had questions about, and some comments and suggestions. A very simple observation form. Here's another simple observation form. forgive the fact that it is not written with time directly under here and observation written under here. That was my mistake. But you simply write down a time that you observe something. Let's say it was the quiet signal, and a comment you would make. Be another time during the lesson where you observe something like a student calling out and not raising his hand, and a comment that you'd want to make, and this would be the observation form that you would use to discuss with your mentee. Now I have added several additional observation forms relating to the different models of teaching. So this one relates to the presentation model. We have in the first column here what the teacher and the student are supposed to do, and you would create an assessment scale. 1 means not at all observed, slightly evident would be 2, 3 somewhat evident, 4 evident, and 5 highly evident, related to these teacher and student behaviors, and then you would write comments in this particular box. Remember, you also will have a Word document so that you could make these boxes larger or smaller. So we simply went over wrote down the various steps for the presentation model. This is a 2-page observation form. We have the same instrument for direct instruction model, here we have the concept attainment model and the key. And we have this for classroom discussion model, cooperative learning model, the problem-based model of teaching is also included. And then we have what are called wide lens observation techniques, which includes videotaping, audio taping, verbatim dictation, which is where you actually write down exactly what you had heard. Sometimes it's called script taping. And there's another form of verbatim dictation, which is called selective verbatim dictation or selective script taping. That's where you only record critical parts of the lesson and you discuss this with your mentee. So what you have here is a selection of observation tools, all of which that you can use in your final project, the handbook for the mentee. And you can modify these in any way you like. And if you choose, you can copy this into your mentee handbook. Although this is all written by me, I give all of you permission to use it in your mentee handbook.